The forbidden scan. The endless black of space stretched before the Zorvax fleet. Stars glimmered in the distance, but their light seemed distant, almost unreachable. It was the perfect time to search for something new, something that could give them the edge over their rivals. And that's when they found it. An old, drifting human warship. Its hull was battered, scared by time and battle, but it still floated quietly through the darkness. The Zorvax Empire had thought humans were long gone, their once mighty fleet lost in the annals of history. This warship, abandoned and silent, was nothing more than a relic, or so they thought. Captain Tyrell, a seasoned leader of the Zorvax fleet, stared at the ancient warship on his ship's screen. His eyes narrowed as he studied its twisted metal and cracked plating. The ship was barely functional, yet it still carried the unmistakable design of a human warship. Even after all these years, the Zorvax had never forgotten the terrifying force humans once commanded. It had been decades since they'd fought with the humans, but Tyrell could still recall the fear and respect that came with those battles. The Zorvax had learned never to underestimate human power. "We need to investigate," Tyrell muttered, his voice low but firm. His crew, alert to his every word, turned their attention to the warship. "We should be cautious," Captain warned Ilara, his second in command. She wasn't known for hesitating, but even she felt uneasy. "That ship looks abandoned. The humans haven't been seen in centuries." Tyrell's sharp gaze turned to Ilara. "That's exactly why we must scan it. The human race may be gone, but their technology could be useful. And if they have left anything of value aboard, we could gain the upper hand against the Kalfar Alliance." His words were enough to silence any further objections. The fleet moved closer to the warship, its haunting stillness making the hairs on the back of Tyrell's neck stand on end. The vastness of space around them seemed even more empty, more silent. As they drew nearer, as the Zorvax ships circled the ancient human vessel, there was an uneasy feeling in the air, but no one dared to voice their fears. They were warriors, brave, strong, and unafraid, or so they thought. The scanning equipment hummed to life as the crew worked quickly to gather data. Tyrell stood at the helm, watching intently as numbers and patterns flashed across the screen. The warship's power systems were dormant, as expected. There were no signs of life. The Zorvax engineers made no indication that anything was wrong. Yet something was off. The ship's scanners, which had been calibrated to detect even the faintest of signals, were now reading strange, irregular patterns. Ilara turned to Tyrell. "Captain, something's wrong. These readings are not normal." "What do you mean?" Tyrell asked, his voice steady but concerned. "It's as if the warship is responding to our scan. Not in a normal way. It's almost like it's alive," she explained, her voice filled with disbelief. Before Tyrell could respond, a sharp sound cut through the quiet. An alarming beep from the control panel. The ship's communication system was flashing with an incoming message, but it was garbled and distorted. Tyrell stepped forward, narrowing his eyes at the screen. The words flickered in and out, but one word was clear: "Awaken." The chill in the air grew even colder. Tyrell felt his heart rate increase, but he held his ground. "What is this?" he muttered under his breath. The message was unsettling, but there was no time to dwell on it. The warship's systems had somehow triggered a response, and now the ship was waking up. The crew worked quickly to reroute the scan, trying to understand what had happened. The moment they did, the lights in the control room flickered, followed by a loud, piercing hum. The entire fleet felt it. A ripple in space, like something massive and ancient had stirred. "Captain," Ilara cried, her voice tight with panic. "The ship is powering up. It's starting to come to life." Tyrell could feel the pulse in the air, the ship's systems beginning to hum with newfound energy. It was as though the human warship, once dormant and forgotten, was shaking off the dust of ages and reawakening. But to what purpose? Bring us out of range, Cyril ordered immediately, his mind racing. He understood the danger now. They had awoken something powerful, something they didn't understand. But it was too late. The Zorvax fleet's engines roared as they tried to retreat, but the warship's energy systems flared with intense force, locking onto their ships with terrifying precision. Every ship in the fleet felt the pull. Their systems were being overridden, their shields flickering under the assault. "Captain, we can't break free," one of the engineers shouted, panic rising in their voice. "The warship's systems are controlling ours. It's too powerful." Suddenly, the warship's massive doors began to open. The Zorvax ships couldn't escape its pull. A strange, deep vibration shook the very fabric of space itself. The energy was building, getting stronger with every passing second. Then the control room lights went out. Everything was silent. Zorel, his heart pounding, could hear only the sound of his own breathing. He knew they were in danger now, not just from the ship, but from whatever was lurking inside. Whatever the human warship had been hiding, it was about to be unleashed. And the Zorvax Empire had just made the terrible mistake of waking it. As the last of the lights flickered out, a low, grinding noise echoed through the ship. The sound came from deep within the human warship. Something ancient, something powerful, something they should never have disturbed. The darkness inside the Zorvax control room was overwhelming. Every screen had gone black, every system offline. The only sounds were the frantic breaths of the crew and the eerie hum of the ancient warship outside. Captain Cyril gritted his teeth, his fingers tightening around the command console. This was not how it was supposed to go. The ship had been a lifeless relic, until they had scanned it. "Status report." Tyrell barked, forcing himself to stay calm. "Systems unresponsive." Yulara's voice cut through the tense air. "Something has overridden our controls. It's like the warship is inside our network." Cyril's stomach tightened. That was impossible. The ship had been drifting for decades, maybe even centuries. Its systems should have been dead. Yet here they were, trapped, their own fleet powerless against something they didn't understand. Outside, the ancient human warship was changing. It had looked broken before, a floating piece of history lost in time. But now, it was coming back to life. The cracks in its hull were glowing faintly, as if energy was returning to its core. Strange symbols flickered along its metal surface, and the once dark windows began to emit a deep crimson light. It was watching them. Then, without warning, the warship moved. It wasn't a slow drift or a minor shift. It turned. Its heavy, armored structure pivoted toward the Zorvax fleet with precision, as if it had been waiting for them all along. Inside the Zorvax command ship, alarms blared. "Captain, the warship has locked onto us," one of the officers shouted. "It's scanning us now." Cyril's mind raced. This was not an abandoned ship. It was a trap, a weapon disguised as a relic. And they had triggered it. The alien fleet's screens flickered back to life, but what appeared on them sent chills through everyone. A message, written in bold, unfamiliar human symbols, followed by a deep robotic voice that translated it. "Unauthorized access DTCT." The voice was cold, unforgiving. "Hostile entity identified." A heavy silence fell across the crew. Tyrell's heart pounded. Shut down the scan. Cut all links to the warship now. But it was too late. The human warship wasn't just scanning them. It was learning from them. Data was being pulled from their ships at an alarming rate. The warship was absorbing their technology, adapting to their systems, understanding their weaknesses. Then, all at once, the gravity around them shifted. The Zorvax ships lurched violently, as if something massive had just taken hold of them. "Captain, we're caught in a gravitational field," Yulera shouted, gripping the console to steady herself. On the screens, more words appeared. "You are not prepared." And then, The warship's main weapon systems activated. Outside, glowing energies surged through the warship's long dormant cannons. Ancient human technology, far beyond anything the Zorvax had ever seen, roared to life. The ship's hull, once silent, now pulsed with terrifying power. Cyril felt a cold realization settle over him. They had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. And now, the warship was waking up. The Zorvax fleet was in chaos. Every screen aboard their command ship flickered wildly, struggling to process the overwhelming surge of information pouring in from the ancient human warship. Captain Cyril felt as if ice had settled in his veins. They had thought this ship was dead, just another relic floating in the void. But it wasn't. It was alive. And now, it was angry. Captain. Yulara's voice was sharp with panic. We are completely locked out of our systems. The warship has overridden our controls. Cyril gritted his teeth. Cut the connection. Shut down all interfaces. We can't. The air in the command room grew heavy as they watched the warship's transformation. Its once dark hull now pulsed with crimson energy. Massive turrets, previously hidden beneath layers of armored plating, slid into place, glowing with a power the Zorvax had never encountered before. Then, without warning, the warship broadcasted another message. This time, it came in flawless Zorvax dialect. This is your only warning. The voice was deep, mechanical, yet unmistakably human. The Zorvax officers exchanged uneasy glances. What does it mean? One of them whispered. Cyril didn't answer. He had a sinking feeling that he already knew. Suddenly, a burst of energy shot from the warship's hull, crackling through space like a whip of lightning. It didn't hit any of the Zorvax ships, but it didn't have to. The energy pulse shut down their weapons, shields, and engines in an instant. Cyril's claws dug into the console. It's disabling us. Another message appeared across their screens. You scanned us. Now we scan you. The Zorvax fleet trembled as the warship initiated its own scan. This was no ordinary data transfer. It was an invasion. Their security codes, fleet movements, weapon specifications, everything was being stripped away in seconds. We're losing classified information. Yulara's voice was barely controlled panic. If this continues, they'll know everything about us. Cyril slammed his fist onto the console. Can we jam it? We're trying, but their technology is too advanced. Our firewalls are useless. Then the scan stopped. For a moment, silence hung in the air. Every officer aboard the Zorvax command ship held their breath, waiting for the next move. Then the warship sent one final message. You are not a threat. Leave. Now. Cyril felt his stomach drop. They had faced countless enemies before, but never had they been dismissed so effortlessly. It wasn't even considering them worth destroying. That was the worst part of all. Without another word, the warship powered down its weapons. The Zorvax ships, still drifting without control, slowly regained basic functionality. Engines flickered back to life, shields reactivated. But the warship did nothing. It simply watched. Cyril took a shaky breath. Order all ships to retreat. Now. No one argued. The fleet turned, moving away from the warship as quickly as they could. As they fled, Cyril cast one last glance at the ship on the screen. It wasn't just an old war machine. It was a guardian, a warning. And the Zorvax had been foolish enough to wake it up. The Zorvax fleet drifted away, battered but intact. Captain Cyril exhaled, relief washing over him. The warship had let them go. Whatever ancient human intelligence controlled it had deemed them insignificant. But not everyone agreed with the retreat. Deep within the Zorvax battlecruiser Vornak, Admiral Krell watched the unfolding events with narrowed eyes. Unlike Cyril, he did not fear this warship. He wanted it. Unacceptable, Krell growled, his mandibles clicking in irritation. This ship, this thing, dares to disable us, and then cast us aside like insects. No, We will not be humiliated. The officers on his bridge shifted uncomfortably. Sir, Captain Tyrell has ordered a full retreat, one of them said cautiously. Krell sneered. Cyril is a coward. He does not see what I see. That ship is a weapon beyond anything in this galaxy. If we control it, we control everything. A hush fell over the room. Everyone knew Krell's reputation. He was ruthless, ambitious, and utterly fearless. Prepare the Vornak for a full assault, Krell commanded. Target the warship's power core. We will claim it for the Zorvax Empire. The officers hesitated. Sir, what if it retaliates? Krell bared his teeth. Then we will show it why the Zorvax are feared across the stars. The warship reacts. As the Zorvax fleet pulled away, the Vornak broke formation, turning back toward the human warship. Its weapons charge, a storm of energy building in its cannons. The massive battlecruiser moved in fast, its sensors locking onto the warship's core. Inside the warship, something changed. The deep red glow in its windows flickered, pulsing with a new intensity. Systems that had remained dormant for centuries began to awaken. A low hum vibrated through space, growing louder. The Vornak fired. A blinding beam of energy erupted from the Zorvax flagship, tearing through the void, aimed directly at the warship's exposed sections. Krell leaned forward, his eyes burning with anticipation. Then, something impossible happened. The warship absorbed the attack. The energy that should have shattered its hull instead vanished into its structure. For a split second, the ship's surface flickered, almost as if it was feeding on the energy. Then it responded. A single turret turned toward the Vornak. Just one. Small, compared to the Zorvax flagship's massive arsenal. Krell smirked. Pathetic, he muttered. Then the turret fired. A thin, almost unimpressive beam of light lanced out. It moved slowly, deliberately, striking the Vornak in the center of its hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then everything happened. The Vornak shuddered violently as alarms blared. The hull cracked. Power conduits exploded in a chain reaction. The ship's shields, thought to be unbreakable, collapsed instantly. Krell staggered, gripping his command chair. Report, he barked. Sir, an officer screamed. The energy from that shot is spreading through our systems. The transmission cut out. Outside, the Vornak erupted in a blinding explosion. The warship's single shot had destroyed one of the most powerful vessels in the Zorvax fleet. The remaining ships, still retreating, watched in stunned silence. On Captain Cyril's bridge, a deathly hush filled the air. They fired on it, Yulera whispered, and it erased them. Admiral closed his eyes, a deep sense of dread settling in his gut. Admiral Krell had made a fatal miscalculation. The warship was not a weapon to be controlled. It was a force beyond their understanding. And now it had proven its power. The remains of the Vornak drifted through the void, a shattered wreck of twisted metal and scorched hull fragments. The Zorvax fleet watched in stunned silence, their sensors barely able to process what had just happened. One moment, Admiral Krell had been leading an attack. The next, his flagship had been erased from existence. Captain Tyrell stood on his bridge, feeling the cold dread creep into his bones. He had warned Krell. He had tried to tell him that this warship was beyond them, that it was something they should not provoke. And now Krell was gone, his arrogance reduced to space debris. We need to leave, Yulera said, her voice barely above a whisper, before it turns its attention to us. Tyrell nodded. All ships, full retreat. Do not engage. Do not scan. Just go. But before they could even turn away, something changed. The warship moved. For the first time, it shifted its position, aligning itself with the Zorvax fleet. A deep, pulsing glow emanated from its core, radiating outward like the heartbeat of something ancient and alive. It wasn't just reacting anymore. It was aware. A new wave of terror swept through the fleet. Zyrel's crew frantically worked the controls, trying to increase their retreat speed. The fleet engaged their drives, their ships stretching the limits of their engines to get away. But then, the warship sent out a signal. A single, undetectable pulse of energy rippled outward. No alarm sounded. No sensors registered a threat. But in that instant, every Zorvax ship froze. Engines sputtered and died. Power systems flickered and went dark. Shields collapsed. Weapons refused to function. It was as if reality itself had paused, trapping them in this moment with no way to escape. Thyrel's breath came in short gasps as he tapped his control panel. Nothing responded. He turned to Ilara, who was frantically trying to reroute power. "Everything's offline," she said, panic creeping into her voice. "I don't understand. There's no damage, no interference. It's like..." She trailed off, unable to find the words. The warship drifted forward. It wasn't moving with propulsion. It simply glided, as if the laws of physics were suggestions rather than rules. The massive vessel loomed over the Zorvax fleet, casting them in its shadow. Its deep red glow pulsed again, like a beast preparing to strike. A voice, ancient and cold, echoed through every ship's communication system. It wasn't a language they knew, yet every Zorvax understood its meaning. "You have seen what was forbidden." Cyrel's blood turned to ice. The glow of the warship intensified. It wasn't charging weapons. It didn't need to. The Zorvax had trespassed where they were not welcome. And now, they would face the consequences. One by one, the ships in the fleet began to disintegrate. There was no explosion, no fire, no debris. They simply vanished, erased from existence, as if they had never been. Cazarel clenched his fists, his mind racing. He had seconds left. This warship was beyond them, beyond their understanding. It was something old, something powerful, something that should never have been awakened. He turned to Ilara. "If we die here, no one will ever know what happened." Ilara's eyes widened. "You're not suggesting." "It's our only chance." The warship continued its silent purge of the fleet. More ships vanished. Soon, it would be their turn. Azirael reached for the emergency data beacon, the only device in their ship still functional. He input a single command, transmitting everything they had recorded about the warship into deep space. It was a desperate act, a final attempt to warn anyone who might find it. The warship's glow pulsed one last time. And then, there was nothing. The Zorvax homeworld stood in eerie silence. The great spires of the capital city gleamed under the twin moons, their surfaces reflecting the artificial glow of countless data streams flowing through the heart of the empire. But tonight, something was different. The High Council chamber, usually filled with the voices of rulers and strategists, was deadly quiet. The emergency beacon had arrived. And with it, a warning they could barely comprehend. Chancellor Vorin stared at the transmission, his mandibles clicking in unease. The fleet, one of the Empire's finest, had vanished. Not in battle, not through sabotage. Simply erased. And the last message from Captain Zyrel was chilling. "We were wrong. The warship is not abandoned. It is waiting, watching. It let us see it, and now it sees us." The counselors shifted uncomfortably, glancing at one another. This was no ordinary threat. This was something that defied reason. General Kathol, a veteran of countless wars, folded his arms. "Perhaps this is an elaborate deception. The humans are cunning, but they are not gods. A single warship cannot be this powerful. It defies all logic." "Logic means nothing," Vorin muttered. His eyes remained fixed on the recording. The warship had moved in ways that shouldn't be possible. It had disabled an entire fleet without firing a single shot. And then it had erased them as if they had never existed. Science Minister Tivex hesitated before speaking. "We have encountered advanced species before, but nothing like this. If the humans have harnessed something beyond our understanding, we must approach with caution." Vorin exhaled sharply. Caution. Captain Zyral's fleet is gone. Do you not understand what this means? That warship, it is not just a machine. It is something else, and we have made the mistake of drawing its attention. A cold silence settled over the chamber. Cathol finally spoke, his voice quieter this time. If it knows about us now, what happens next? The question hung in the air like a storm cloud. None of them had an answer. And then the lights flickered. For a brief moment, every screen in the chamber went dark. The ever-present hum of data streams ceased, plunging the room into an unnatural stillness. When the displays returned, a single image remained on every screen. The warship. It was closer now, and it was watching. The warship hung in space like a dark, foreboding shadow, its presence now an undeniable truth that weighed heavily on the hearts of all who dared to look upon it. The Zorvax fleet had been eradicated, its existence wiped away in a blink. The High Council knew they were next, but there was no escape. The warship was coming for them, and it moved with purpose, its massive form blocking out the stars around it. The galaxy had never seen anything like it. No one knew how to fight it. Back on Zorvax Prime, Chancellor Vorin paced restlessly in his command room. His mind raced as the warship's ominous presence grew closer. He'd seen empires rise and fall, but never before had he felt so helpless. The warship had erased the Zorvax fleet without so much as a warning shot. It didn't follow conventional logic or war strategies. It simply was, and it was impossible to ignore. "We must prepare," General Cathol said, his voice low, but determined. "The fleet we once had is gone, but we are not without resources. If we can rally our remaining ships, perhaps we can hold it off." Vorin shook his head. "We cannot fight what we cannot understand. What we face is beyond us, beyond any force we've ever encountered. It doesn't just destroy, it erases. And if it has found us, it will erase us too." The words hung in the air, as if the very notion of them would somehow trigger the warship's next move. A deadly stillness filled the room. Suddenly, the alert systems blared, breaking the tension. A message appeared on every screen. It was a transmission, and it was not from any Zorvax vessel. The message was in a language unfamiliar, ancient even, but it was not random. It was directed at them. The text scrolled across the screens, its eerie simplicity sending shivers down the spines of the council members. "You trespassed. You are no longer welcome." And with that, the galaxy trembled. The warship sent out another pulse, one far stronger than before. This time, it wasn't just a field of energy. It was as if the very fabric of space itself was unraveling. The Zorvax fleet, what little remained of it, was caught in its wake. Engines sputtered. Shields fell apart. Ships vanished into nothingness. There was no explosion, no grand spectacle, just a sudden, complete absence. The council stared in horror as the last vestiges of the fleet were wiped out, one by one. Vorin's hands trembled as he reached for his communication console. There were no more allies to call, no more defenses. The Zorvax Empire had no answer for what stood before them. The warship had shown them its power, and now it was coming for the homeworld. As the massive ship loomed ever closer, an eerie silence fell over Zorvax Prime. The people, unaware of the incoming doom, went about their daily lives, oblivious to the fact that the very foundation of their empire was about to crumble. And then, just as it seemed that all hope was lost, a new transmission came through, this time from an unexpected source. It was a warning, a message from the humans. The warship cannot be stopped by force, but it can be delayed, at a cost. The message faded, leaving only the chilling echo of those words. It can be delayed at a cost. The clock was ticking, and the question remained, what price would the Zorvax have to pay to survive? Would they face their inevitable destruction, or was there still hope for them to find a way out of this nightmare? The warship was coming for them, and there was nothing they could do to stop it, or was there? The Forbidden Discovery. The Zorvax science vessel, Vorkesh drifted silently through the void, its scanners locked onto the massive, lifeless warship floating in the darkness. Commander Threx stood at the observation window. His 4 eyes narrowed as he studied the alien structure. It was unlike anything he had ever seen, sleek, black, and covered in a strange metallic plating that seemed to absorb the starlight around it. There were no visible signs of life, no energy emissions, and no communication signals. "Are we certain it's inactive?" Threx asked, his voice steady but cautious. Lead researcher Valmik, a thin Zorvax with nervous hands, nodded. "Completely dead, Commander. No movement, no power signature, just a lifeless husk." And yet, Threx muttered, it reached this sector somehow. The silence on the bridge was heavy. The Zorvax Empire had encountered many alien species before, but the humans were still a mystery. They were not part of the Galactic Council. They did not trade, did not negotiate, did not bow to any empire. They remained hidden in their own corner of the galaxy, only emerging when provoked. And those who provoked them never returned to tell the tale. "Initiate a deep scan," Threx ordered. "I want to know what's inside that thing." The technicians obeyed, their clawed fingers dancing over glowing control panels. A high-frequency scan pulsed outward, washing over the human warship. At first, nothing happened. Then, the readings came in. Valmik frowned. "Strange. The exterior plating is resisting the scan. We're only getting partial data." "Push harder," Threx commanded. The scanners intensified. More data appeared on the screens. Internal corridors, a massive central core, and thousands of chambers filled with something. The readings fluctuated wildly. The system struggled to interpret the data. Then, suddenly, the warship woke up. The bridge lights flickered. The scan monitors glitched, displaying distorted images. Then, a deep hum vibrated through Vorkesh's hull. The Zorvax crew froze. "What was that?" Valmik whispered. The sensors technician's voice shook. "Commander, the warship just emitted an energy pulse. It wasn't dead. It was dormant." On the main screen, the warship's exterior plating began shifting, like living metal stretching and reshaping itself. A red light ignited deep within its core, pulsating like a heartbeat. Then, a signal came through. Not a distress call, not a warning. A message, in a language the Zorvax did not understand. Yet it filled the bridge with an overwhelming, unshakable sense of dread. "You should not have scanned us." Threx's breath caught in his throat. The warship moved. The Zorvax crew watched in stunned silence as the warship's massive form shifted in space. It wasn't supposed to move. It had been dormant, lifeless, and yet now it was alive. The hum that had reverberated through the Vorkesh was now gone, replaced by an unsettling silence. But the warship wasn't still. It was changing. Commander Threx's hand instinctively gripped the edge of his console, his mind racing. What was this? How could this happen? The warship had been dead, inert. There had been no signs of any life aboard it. Now, in front of them, it seemed like it was waking from a long slumber, its cold, metallic exterior now shifting with purpose. "What is it doing?" Threx asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Valmik turned from the data terminal, his face pale. I don't know, Commander. The scans are showing." He cut himself off as the screen flashed red. "The warship's internal systems are online. It's preparing something." Threx's heart raced. There was no way to prepare for this. No way to stop it. His mind was racing through every possible scenario, trying to calculate the odds. But nothing made sense. They had scanned it, yes, but it had been dead. That had to mean something. Before he could say anything else, the warship did the unthinkable. It moved. Slowly, it began to rotate, its massive body swinging toward the Vorkesh, like a predator sizing up its prey. The Zorvax crew, still frozen in shock, could only watch as the warship turned. It didn't just float, It glided like it was controlled by something far beyond what they had ever encountered. "What the hell?" Valmik whispered. Threx's mind raced. The warship couldn't be doing this. It was impossible. Yet there it was, turning, its surface gleaming darkly in the distant light of nearby stars. Then, without warning, the warship sent out another pulse, this one far stronger than the last. "Shields up," Threx barked, snapping out of his shock. The crew quickly obeyed, scrambling to activate the Vorkesh's defenses, but it was too late. The pulse hit. It was like nothing they had ever experienced. The entire ship shuddered, and all systems blinked off. The Zorvacs were no longer in control. Every piece of equipment malfunctioned. Communications, weapons, engines, everything. "Report," Threx demanded, though he feared he already knew the answer. Valmik was struggling to bring his terminal back online. His face was drawn, sweat beading on his forehead. I can't get anything. We've lost control of all systems." Threx's chest tightened as the realization hit him. They were at the mercy of this alien ship, a warship unlike anything they had ever encountered. It wasn't just a machine. It was alive, and it was aware of them. Another message flashed onto the screen. This one was in a language that seemed ancient, beyond anything the Zorvacs had encountered. The text began to translate itself as the ship's AI worked to decipher it. "You are the trespassers. You should not have woken us." The words felt like a death sentence. The warship wasn't just warning them. It was punishing them. It had scanned them back, understood them, and now it was aware. There was no escape. There was no way out. And then, to their horror, the warship made its first move. A massive beam of light shot out from its core, not aimed directly at them, but at the empty space between the two ships. It seemed to stretch outward, like a bridge, expanding, covering the distance. The beam didn't stop, didn't lose strength as it traveled. It grew stronger, and it wasn't aimed at anything specific. "What is that?" Valmik gasped. Threx's mind struggled to process the unfolding situation. The beam was not a weapon. It was an extension, a part of the ship itself, and it was reaching for them. "Brace for impact," Threx ordered, but the words barely left his mouth before another pulse ripped through the Vorkesh, sending them spiraling into darkness. The warship wasn't just scanning them anymore. It had seen them, and now it was coming for them. They had disturbed something ancient, something far beyond their understanding. And as the Zorvac ship began to lose stability, Threx knew one thing for sure. The warship wasn't just an enemy. It was a nightmare they had awoken. And now, it was coming for them. The Vorkesh drifted in the endless void, its systems flickering weakly as the Zorvac's crew struggled to regain control. The human warship loomed before them, silent yet terrifying, its presence heavier than the crushing weight of space itself. No communication had been sent, no weapon had been fired. Yet the warship had already won. Commander Threx gritted his teeth as he tried to stabilize their vessel. "Status report," he barked, his voice sharp with frustration. Valmik slammed his claws against the console, forcing the unresponsive system to reboot. The pulse disrupted everything. "Weapons are down. Navigation is offline. We're dead in space." Threx cursed under his breath. This was no ordinary ship. The humans had built something unnatural, something that shouldn't exist. A sudden beeping noise filled the bridge. The crew turned, eyes widening as the warship finally made its move. It wasn't attacking. It wasn't retreating. It was sending them a message. A transmission forced its way onto their screen. The symbols twisted and glitched before morphing into something legible. The Zorvac's crew watched in horror as the message completed its translation. "You are not prepared." Silence. No one moved. No one dared to speak. And then, the warship powered up again. The energy levels spiked, readings soaring off the charts. The ship was no longer just watching them. It was preparing for something. "Commander," Valmik's voice was barely a whisper. "We need to leave. Now." Threx didn't argue. His instincts screamed at him to run. But there was one problem. "We have no control over our ship. How do we escape?" A new sound filled the air, a low, eerie hum that vibrated through the Vorkesh's hull. The human warship was doing something to them. Then, without warning, their screams came back to life. Systems rebooted. Engines flared. The ship's power surged to full capacity. It was as if an unseen hand had fixed their vessel in an instant. Valmik hesitated. It restored our systems." Threx's claws tightened on the console. "No, it's giving us a chance." The human warship had the power to destroy them. It had the ability to keep them trapped. But it had done neither. Instead, it had let them go. The meaning was clear. The humans weren't just showing their strength. They were warning them. And the Zorvax had no choice but to listen. As the Vorkesh's systems hummed back to life, the crew was left in stunned silence. The human warship, silent and menacing, loomed in front of them, its presence heavy in the cold expanse of space. It had done something that no other alien race had ever done before. It had given them a chance to escape. Commander Threx was still gripping the edge of his command seat, his mind racing. Every instinct told him to flee, to take advantage of the opportunity and leave this cursed ship behind. Yet, something inside him hesitated. The warship hadn't destroyed them. It hadn't attacked. It had only warned them. "Commander," Valmik's voice broke through his thoughts. "We can't just leave. What if it follows us? What if it's not done with us yet?" Threx's mind was torn. The warning was clear, but the question remained. Why hadn't the warship finished them off when it had the chance? Why had it allowed them to escape when it could have easily destroyed the Vorkesh with a single strike? He turned to Valmik. "Set a course back to Zorvax space, but keep the shields at maximum. We don't know what that ship is capable of, but we don't take chances." The crew worked in tense silence, preparing the ship for departure. The Vorkesh lurched slightly as it moved away from the ominous warship, its engines kicking to life under the crew's control. They moved at a slow pace, keeping a wary eye on the warship, which remained still and silent in the void. But as they put distance between themselves and the human vessel, something strange began to happen. The Zorvax crew had expected the warship to stay in place, to watch them leave with no further interest. Instead, the warship began to follow them. At first, it was subtle, just a slight shift in its position. But as the Vorkesh accelerated, the human warship matched their speed. "Commander, it's following us," Valmik shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "It's keeping pace with us." Threx's blood ran cold. This wasn't just a passive observation. It was an active pursuit. "Increase speed. Get us out of here," Threx commanded, his voice urgent. The Vorkesh surged forward, its engines pushing it to its limit. But no matter how fast they went, the human warship remained with them, never letting up, never faltering. Then, something even more terrifying happened. The warship fired. Not a typical weapon blast, but a beam of energy so bright and intense that it lit up the entire region of space around them. The beam struck the Vorkesh, and for a moment, it felt like time itself had frozen. The ship shuddered violently under the impact, and for an instant, it felt as though they were caught in the grip of some invisible force. The bridge lights flickered, and the ship's systems went haywire. Warning lights flashed across the consoles, and the crew struggled to stay on their feet as the force of the beam slammed into them. "Report," Threx demanded, gripping his seat. Valmik gasped, his claws flying over the controls. The shields held, but the impact damaged the outer hull. The warship's beam didn't just cause damage. It's reprogramming our systems. Threx's eyes widened. "Reprogramming? What are you talking about?" "It's taking control of our ship," Valmik shouted, panic evident in his voice. "It's using the pulse to rewrite our systems. We're losing control again." The Zorvak's crew watched in horror as the warship's beam intensified, and the Vorkesh began to lose its autonomy. The ship no longer felt like their own. It felt as if it was becoming part of the warship's will. Threx's heart raced, prepared to make an emergency jump. Get us out of here. But as they scrambled to initiate the jump, the human warship fired again, cutting off their escape. The beam ripped through space, slamming into the Vorkesh with brutal force. Everything went dark. Threx's final thought before the power failed completely was this: the warship wasn't just hunting them, it was enslaving them, and they were powerless to stop it. The Vorkesh was no longer the same ship. It had been reduced to a mere shell, stripped of its identity and control. The crew, once filled with confidence and pride in their ship, now found themselves prisoners aboard a vessel they couldn't command, trapped by a force they couldn't understand. Commander Threx staggered to his feet as the emergency lights flickered on, casting an eerie glow over the bridge. The hum of the engines had stopped, replaced by an unnerving silence that seemed to stretch on forever. His hand shook slightly as he grasped the edge of his chair, trying to steady himself. "Valmik," he called out, his voice hoarse. "Status report." Valmik was at the control panel, his claws moving frantically over the console. The screens before him flickered and glitched, but the numbers were unmistakable. The ship was no longer responding to their commands. "The ship is. It's not ours anymore," Valmik said, his voice tight with disbelief. "The systems have been completely overridden. We can't even send a distress signal." Threx clenched his fists in frustration. He could feel the warship's presence, even without seeing it. It was still there, hovering just outside their reach, like a silent predator watching its prey. "Did it do this on purpose?" Valmik asked, fear creeping into his voice. "Is this some kind of game? Some kind of trap?" "I don't know," Threx replied, his mind racing. He had no answers, none that made sense. The humans, how were they capable of this? How could a race so seemingly primitive possess technology that could bend the will of an entire ship, let alone one as advanced as the Vorkesh? Suddenly, the entire ship shook, and an alarm blared to life. "Alert!" Valmik shouted. "It's firing again." Threx's heart skipped a beat as the unmistakable beam of energy shot out from the human warship. But this time, it was different. The beam wasn't directed at them. It was aimed directly at the core of the Vorkesh. "The core," Threx barked. "We have to stop it before." But it was too late. The beam hit its mark. A massive explosion rocked the ship as the core began to overload, the violent shockwave slamming through the hull. The bridge was thrown into chaos, and Threx barely managed to hold onto the console as the ship groaned under the immense pressure. "The core is destabilizing," Valmik screamed. "We're going to lose everything." Threx fought to keep his bearings. The damage was catastrophic. If the core exploded, they would be gone, obliterated in an instant. He didn't even have time to think about escape. "Shut down the core," he ordered, his voice cutting through the chaos. Valmik's claws flew over the console, desperately trying to access the emergency shutdown procedures. But every attempt was met with resistance. The warship's beam had locked down the ship's systems, and they were powerless to stop it. "We're running out of time," Valmik shouted, panic rising in his voice. "I can't override it." Threx looked out the viewports, his mind numb with fear and frustration. The human warship, still hovering just outside their reach, had not fired a single shot at them since the beam had struck the core. But it was watching, waiting. It was controlling them, guiding them toward their doom. The ship continued to tremble, the lights flickering and the hull creaking as the pressure from the unstable core built. It wouldn't be long before everything collapsed in on itself. "We need to escape," Threx shouted. "Get us away from the core, any way you can." But even as he spoke, he knew it was hopeless. The human warship had already won. They had been outmatched and outclassed by an enemy they didn't understand, a foe whose power was beyond anything they had ever faced. And in that moment, Frex realized the terrible truth. The humans had never meant to destroy them. They had merely shown them what they were capable of. And now, they were letting the Zorvax feel the full weight of their power. The ship was dying. Commander Threx could feel it. The slow, inevitable collapse of the Vorkesh as the core spiraled toward critical failure. The lights flickered, casting long shadows across the bridge, while alarms blared in a chaotic chorus of doom. Valmik's claws moved desperately over the control panel, but the ship refused to obey. Every attempt to stabilize the core was met with rejection. The human warship had locked them out completely. "We are losing containment," Valmik shouted. "The core will collapse in less than 3 minutes." Threx's mind raced, searching for a way, any way, to survive. But the reality was suffocating. They had been reduced to helpless spectators in their own ship. The human warship had done this without firing a single lethal shot. Through the viewport, the warship loomed, dark and menacing, a silent executioner watching its victim struggle. "Can we jettison the core?" Threx asked, though he already feared the answer. Valmik shook his head. "The system won't allow it. The humans have control of everything. I can't override it." A deep unease settled in Threx's chest. The humans weren't killing them outright. They had disabled the ship, crippled it beyond repair, and now they were letting it tear itself apart. A message flickered on the main screen. It wasn't Zorvaxian script. It was human. Valmik's hands trembled as he translated it. It says, "You shouldn't have looked." Threx's blood ran cold. They had uncovered something they were never meant to see. The scan of the human warship had not just revealed data, it had triggered something. A response, a warning, a punishment. The humans had let them look. And now, they were ensuring the Zorvax never forgot why they shouldn't have. A violent tremor rocked the ship. The core was reaching its breaking point. The bridge was bathed in an ominous red glow as heat levels spiked beyond safety limits. "We have to abandon ship," Threx ordered. "Now." But before they could move, the screens flickered again. Another message. One simple word. "Stay." It wasn't a suggestion. It was a command. A command from something far beyond their understanding. The silence on the bridge was suffocating. Threx and Valmik stood frozen, staring at the screen that flashed the word. "Stay." For a moment, Threx's mind refused to comprehend what was happening. The ship was dying, and yet the message on the screen told them to remain where they were. Was it some kind of cruel joke? A final insult from the humans before they were obliterated? "Commander," Valmik's voice trembled, barely a whisper. "What do we do?" Threx took a step back, his mind racing. "Stay." What did it mean? Was the human warship trying to play with them? Or was this something deeper, something they couldn't fathom? He glanced at the viewport again, watching as the human warship remained motionless, silent as ever. It didn't move, didn't attack, didn't make another move to finish them off. It was as if it was simply watching them, waiting for something. "Valmik, try one more time," Threx ordered, though his voice held none of its usual confidence. "Override the ship's lockdown. See if you can." Before he could finish, the bridge shook again, this time with an intensity that sent the crew stumbling. The alarms blared louder, echoing through the halls of the Vorkesh. The core was seconds away from going critical. The Zorvax commander turned to Valmik, his voice low and urgent. "You need to get to the escape pods. Now." But Valmik didn't move. His eyes were still fixed on the screen, on the word "stay." It was as if something invisible was holding him in place. He couldn't tear himself away. "Valmik," Threx shouted, his desperation rising. But it was too late. A low hum filled the room. And then, something changed. The ship's entire structure vibrated, as if the Vorkesh itself was alive. The lights blinked out for a split second, leaving only the red emergency glow. When they came back on, the walls, the floor, the very air felt different. The ship felt different. Valmik turned to Threx, his face pale. "Commander, I think it's changing. The ship, it's shifting." Threx's eyes widened as he looked around. The Vorkesh no longer felt like the warship they had once known. The walls were pulsing, the hull groaning as if under immense pressure. Something in the ship had awakened. He ran to the control panel, trying to get some sort of reading, but all the systems were dead. The human warship had done this. It had forced their ship to evolve. No, that wasn't the right word. It was like the human vessel was forcing them into a new phase, a new purpose. Suddenly, the hum grew louder, vibrating through their bones, almost as if the ship was resonating with something deep within its core. And then the message appeared again. But this time, it was different. "Join us." The words were no longer a command, but an invitation. The Vorkesh wasn't dying anymore. It was awakening. Threx felt his breath catch in his throat as the realization hit him like a wave. The humans hadn't been trying to destroy them. They hadn't been playing games with them. They hadn't been toying with their lives. They had shown them a truth, one that was beyond anything the Zorvax could comprehend. The ship was alive, and it was calling them to join it. The human warship had done something unimaginable. It had unlocked a hidden potential in the Vorkesh, a potential that the Zorvax had never even known existed. A potential that went beyond technology, beyond weapons, beyond anything they had ever been capable of. They were no longer the hunters. The humans had made them the hunted. And now, they were being forced to become part of something greater. A new terror filled Threx's chest, but it wasn't the kind he had felt when the warship first struck them down. This was different. This was fear of the unknown. Fear of what lay ahead. As the hum of the ship grew louder and more intense, Threx turned to Valmik. "We have no choice," he whispered. "We have to follow." And with that, they stepped forward into the unknown, knowing they were no longer masters of their fate. The Vorkesh was no longer theirs. The human warship had claimed them, body and soul. And nothing would ever be the same again.